Black Swan is the latest psychological thriller to capture the imagination of American culture. And it's done so because it's a very powerful story, very tragic story as well. And I think it's important to make sure that it stays a tragedy and not try to make it into a comedy. That is, not try to make it have a happy ending. And you see this tendency to try to make a tragic story into a comedy within the movie itself, but we'll get more to that later. Nina is the star of the movie, played by Natalie Portman, and she's trying to become the star of Swan Lake. And Swan Lake is about two swans, a black swan and a white swan, who try to gain the affections of a prince. And if they can do so, then they will be turned back into human beings. Well, the black swan, through devious plans, ends up winning the affections of the prince. And the white swan has put all of her value in this relationship with the prince and whether or not she will be loved by him. And since all of her value, since she's dependent on this value, on this relationship with the prince, and she doesn't win his love, she doesn't feel like she has any value left, and so she kills herself. She commits suicide. And this is a tragedy. But throughout the show, you have this idea that really it's not a tragedy, and that the white swan gains freedom from this dependency on others for value, for worth in her life. And isn't it great that she kills herself and now she's free? To which I want to say, no, it's a tragedy. And you see this working out in Nina's life, where she's dependent on others for meaning and for her value. So 3 relationships. Her relationship with her mother. Her mother is a former ballerina who had this dream of becoming a star, but then she became pregnant, and Nina was born. And so you get this tension in the relationship between Nina and her mother. Her mother wants Nina to become this great ballerina, this great star. And so Nina also wants to become this great star. So she's given this identity from her mother. But her mother also sees Nina as this kind of stumbling block, because if it wasn't for Nina, she might have been able to live out her dreams. And so there's this tension in their relationship. But the relationship also shows how dependent Nina is on her mother. The second relationship is Nina's relationship with the director of the play, who chooses her to be the White Swan and also the Black Swan. So Nina has to play out this dual role, and she has to be innocent but also devious. Innocent as the White Swan and devious as the Black Swan. Well, Nina herself is fairly innocent, and she has a hard time being devious and playing out this Black Swan. So the director has these expectations of her to be able to hold both roles at the same time, and he's trying to bring out of Nina this devious aspect from her. And so Nina is dependent on the director of the show to be able to become the Black Swan. So you see this dependency in that relationship too. And there's this other relationship where a rival comes in. The one who could be the Black Swan and the White Swan. She's more devious, and so the director likes her. He thinks that she can also play this lead role, and so there's this rivalry that ends up coming out between Nina and this other ballerina. And they end up forming some kind of a friendship. And you never really know where they stand, because Nina is always threatened by this other ballerina. So much so that all of these relationships that that absorb her end up causing her to go crazy. And she doesn't know how to leave one behind and grasp onto the other. She's just consumed by all of them, and she doesn't know how to live her life, so it ends up making her crazy. The tragedy of Nina's relationships is that they are either out to manipulate her, to use her, or to defeat her. And so these are destructive relationships. Nina is dependent on the people in her life, as we all are. That's not the problem. The problem is when those relationships become destructive and we get caught in this trap of destruction that can lead us to insanity and can lead us into something like suicide. The issue is that it doesn't have to be this way. Once we see that the relationships in our lives are destructive, are manipulative, are based on using of the other person, we can choose to get out. We can choose to find new communities. We can choose to find new relationships that are hopefully based on not manipulation, but on love, on seeking what is best for the other. And that, I think, is the warning that Black Swan puts before us. That when we get caught up in these destructive relationships, the only thing that's going to come out of them is more destruction. And so the warning is, find another way. Find another way into community that is based on love. For it is in communities that are based on love where we find our true freedom. So those are my thoughts on Black Swan, and I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks.